Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Dave Bailey. I want to thank you for joining us. This is Grief and Grace. In an article this week in Mental Health News called Understanding Grief in the Age of the COVID-19 Pandemic, they made this statement. The global coronavirus pandemic has created a new reality marked by grief and loss. And it has forced us to process both individual and collective grief in the face of an uncertain future over which we are powerless. And in my work with the largest provider of funeral services in North America, I see the personal and social reality of this on a daily basis. And so this Facebook Live was started to be one of the spaces and one of the voices helping to process a little of what we are all facing together. You can really help the reach of this if you give us a like. And if you know someone that you think could benefit from the ideas we're talking about, why don't you go ahead and tag them in the comments, and they'll get a notification. They'll be able to log on. Also, if you have a question during the show, just put it down in the comments, and we'll take some time to answer them before we finish tonight. So excited. My guest tonight is Glenda Stansbury, who is the Marketing and Development Director for Insight Books and the Dean and Training Coordinator for the Insight Institute. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Special Education from Central State University, as well as a Bachelor of Science in Funeral Service from the University of Central Oklahoma, and a Master's in Administrative Leadership from the University of Oklahoma. Along with everything else that she does, she's also a full-time instructor in the Department of Funeral Services in the University of Central Oklahoma, and she has helped to train over 4,000 celebrants through the Insight Institute. So, super stoked that you're here tonight, Glenda. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased to be here.
Hang on. Did I bring you up? I think you are up with me. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yes, I can. Let me just, I need an engineer to work with me here. I'm going to bring up there we go. We met a little over 5 years ago when I attended a training with Insight, and then I went on to develop the Life Well Celebrated program for the Seattle market of Dignity Memorial. And now the last year I've been here in Houston, and you've been a big part of my success. And one of the things that I love about you, although I'm not quite sure how you find all the time and energy, is that you still personally serve families as a celebrant. So this isn't just philosophical for you. You still are face to face with people's pain on a weekly basis.
Correct.
And as we were talking the other day, we spoke at length about the idea of unresolved grief, which is something that you witness as you serve families, something that you speak about on a regular basis, and something that I'd love to explore with you more tonight. So let's start right there. Help us understand what unresolved grief is.
Well, from my experiences in working with families and in all of the work that we have done in Insight Books, first of all, we as a society, especially as a Western culture society, we really don't grieve well. You know, we give people 3 days of bereavement leave, and we expect everybody to be back, and it's okay, and don't talk about it, and move on. And so we've never really created safe spaces for people to fully experience whatever grief grief journey that they're going to have. And so in order to survive and in order to keep going, we just kind of stuff it down and move on. So there's a lot of people out there who have not had the full range of opportunities to really express their grief.
Yes.
When it gets really complicated then is when they truly have either not had any kind of opportunity to grieve a loss, to acknowledge a loss, to have that opportunity, or they were stifled or disengaged from that grief process. And it can show up much later. It can show up years later in all kinds of difficult situations and in health situations and all of those kinds of pieces. And we don't recognize it at the time as grief. We recognize it as a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue or um, a hoarding issue, any of those kinds of pieces where I'm displaying for you that I've had loss and I don't know how to deal with it, but we categorize it in a different way. So unresolved grief really can be one of the largest health issues that we have to face in this country. We just don't know how to quantify that and define that, so we put it into different categories. If I didn't get to have the kind of healthy experience to begin my grief journey or to complete my grief journey, then I'm carrying that with me wherever I go and in whatever situation I get into.
Yes. I want to apologize to you and to our viewers. Our Skype contact is a little bit glitchy, so you kind of stop for a while. Your audio keeps going, and then your picture catches up to your audio. So if you're watching tonight, I apologize for the glitchiness of it, but you're getting all of the audio, and that's what's important at the end of the day. That's exactly right. Oh, the joy of technology. Yes. So can you illustrate for us, tell us some stories from the families that you've worked with to help us understand? Because what I've been trying to do on this show is to come at grief from all different angles so that people understand it. So often when you talk with people about grief, all they've heard of is the 5 stages of grief or something like that, and they think that grief is a really straightforward, I'm sad, I'll get over it, kind of thing, which is why we give people the 3 days to grieve, because it's not that complicated. But when you work in the grief space, you realize how incredibly complicated it is. You have anticipatory grief. You have all of these different things. So tell us some stories. Help us understand a little bit about families you've worked with around unresolved grief.
Okay. One story that I have used a lot in illustrating this kind of process is a young woman that I was privileged to do the service for. Her life started back when she was 10, and her mother dropped dead in front of her from a brain aneurysm. So you've got a little 10-year-old girl at home with a dead mother on the floor. Now, there's all kinds of pieces to that need to be addressed, but we don't understand how children grieve, and
Exactly.
So I'm sure she was not given the support or the time or the space to really deal with that kind of trauma of watching your mother die in front of your eyes. When she was 20, she was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Wow.
So pretty much told you've got 6 months to live, and you could track back. We often think that unresolved grief can then manifest itself in physical applications as well, but we can't make those direct correlations. But for any rate, she was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's, and she overcame it. 2 years of brutal treatment, but she did come out on the other side. Now, there's a lot to grieve there. She lost 2 years of her life. She dropped out of college. She lost all of her opportunities for being a young, healthy 20-year-old. But if she had tried to express that grief, people would have very immediately said, "What are you grieving about? You're well."
Yes. Yeah, totally.
So
you should be happy. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Celebrate, right?
Yes.
And so not long after that, she met and married a young man who was a Apache helicopter pilot. And this was at the height of the Middle East war, and so he was deployed 4 times. Afghanistan, Iraq, dangerous places, and helicopters are always in danger. So she lived the first 6 years of her married life raising 2 children at home by herself, not knowing any day if she was going to get that phone call or a knock on the door.
Yes.
Now, there's some real grief attached to what I thought my married life was going to look like, and the support and the love and the fun, rather than living under this cloud all the time.
Yes.
all of those really accumulated, and she became depressed, and she started hoarding. And hoarding is a real indicator sometimes of people who, I've lost too much, therefore I'm not going to lose anything else.
Hmm.
Hoarding is not people who are too lazy to take out the trash.
Yes.
Hoarding are people who are hurt, who have holes, and they're going to fill them with stuff around them.
Hmm.
So she started hoarding her house, and she's got, a
I feel like
6-year-old.
I feel like just that has helped some people understand some things straight
Yes,
away. Yes.
it's absolutely true. You listen to anybody on those hoarder shows, and they will absolutely articulate, I was fine until. I was fine
Yes.
until. And then I couldn't. And so that's probably one of the best manifestations of unresolved grief that we can see
Wow.
physically is, I can't feel this, so I'll just feel everything around me.
Hmm.
So she had 2 children, 6 and 4. Her family was concerned about her. Her husband was concerned about her, and they went to her lovingly and said, "We need to help you. You need to get into therapy. We need to help you clean the house. How can we help?" And the next day, she walked into her bathroom in front of her husband and shot herself.
Wow.
So I was called to do the service. And when I heard the whole story, I mean, this sounds kind of sad, but I went, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Because there were so many pieces that layered upon layered upon layered, and she never had that opportunity to say, help me find my way through this grief journey.
Yes.
I'm just going to keep going, and nobody's really going to be able to connect it back to all of the losses I've had.
Wow.
So it's powerful. I mean, it's kind of, it takes your breath away when you really stop and think about those kind of implications. Another place that you see a whole lot of unresolved grief is with mothers who have lost babies,
Hmm.
either during pregnancy or miscarried at birth, because that's treated like minor grief.
Yes.
That's treated like, you can have another one. You didn't get to know him, move on.
Yes.
And so many of those families don't even get to name the baby or have services. So, it's just kind of a medical procedure rather than, an emotional procedure.
Yes.
So I met with a woman a couple of years ago, and she had lost a baby in utero. And as we're talking about this baby and what she had named him and what her plans were, because I love to do that with families.
Yes.
They've lost a 30-week baby, but they knew everything that baby was going to be. They had they had colleges picked
Yes.
out. So let's talk about that story. Let's talk about the love story that created this baby. And then she brought up that she had lost a baby 5 years before, and she never got to hold him, and she never got to see him, and she didn't have a service for him. And she truly was more brokenhearted over that loss than she was this baby that she had just lost.
Wow.
And so we had a double funeral. And we
Wow.
talked about that baby and talked about who he was and named him. And she had his little urn, that they had given her 5 years previous. So we had a double funeral for this little baby, which relieved so much pressure. She kept saying to me, do you think that he thought that I abandoned him? Do you think that he knows that I love him? And I mean, she just had
Wow.
so much stuff going on. When everybody was going, you didn't get to know the baby. So there are so many steps that we fail to identify in how do we allow space?
Yes.
How do we allow sacred space, if you will, for people to fully explore that non-linear line?
Yes.
I hate the 5 stages of grief. I think
Totally.
it was a mistake when it came out. That's not what she had intended. It
Yep.
was the 5 stages of getting ready to die.
To die. That's exactly right. Yep.
And so we grabbed it up because it felt good, because I can go from point A to point B to point C to point B. And we like linear.
Yep.
It helps. And so we have created this monster out there for people to say, well, you're in this stage, you need to get to
Yes.
this stage. Rather than, it is just a really windy road, and you may be fine today, and you may be in bed for 3 days tomorrow.
Yes.
And all of that's healthy.
And this might be 3 years down the road that.
Yes, yes, that you really don't know when it's going to hit you, especially if you kind of suppressed it to begin with.
Yes.
And then it comes back, and all of a sudden you're divorcing your spouse because you don't know how to express anything.
Yes.
So it has so many implications, and I think that's, you laugh at how do I do all this stuff? The thing that keeps me going, I mean, I have 2 funerals to do this week, but the thing that keeps me going every day is, one of the most healing things that we do for families is to give them a healthy start.
Yes.
And if that means that I stay up till midnight writing a service so that somebody can have a good start and an open start and a healthy start, then hopefully I have created one less opportunity for a difficult and a complicated relationship and experience on down the road.
So true. I say to my staff all the time that we are like grief midwives. We help people begin the process of birthing their grief.
Yes.
They have to take it home. They have to care for it. But we, so often I find, again, training with my staff and myself, I find often that the family meeting, the couple of hours or 3 hours that you spend with a family, and you give them permission, and you give them vocabulary, and you give them ways of thinking about grief and life and death and all of these things, that is virtually more powerful than the service itself. Because by the time they get to the service, you've sown so many ideas and into their lives, and they're ready to then take on the task of grieving.
Well, and you've also set the stage for how to be listened to.
Yes.
And for them to understand what it feels like to be listened to. So hopefully they will take that and seek out those people who will listen to them.
Yeah.
This month last month in June was a really, really hard month. I had 5 suicides.
Wow.
And I met with one family, and the father kept saying, why can't I find closure? And I said, honey, closure is a myth.
Yes, totally.
You're never going to find closure.
Yes.
You're going to find a whole lot of closings. You're going to find different
Okay,
places.
wait. You need to roll that one back. That's profound. You will never find closure. You will find a whole lot of closings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we keep looking for that magic moment,
Yes.
that magic bullet, that magic, whatever that's going to close the door on that experience. And that doesn't happen. And so we have to find those places where my first closing is, I can think about my son.
Yes.
Without melting into a puddle. I can think about his memory and his smile, and it brings a little bit of relief.
Yes.
Rather than pain. That's a closing. I can look at pictures. I can listen to his favorite music. I can celebrate his birthday. There's all of those along the line closings that we find where then it becomes, I always think that the grief journey, when you're there, when you have finally gotten to that place of peace, is when you can be grateful. Yes. Gratitude is the end result, not closure. Yes. Gratitude is the end result. Gratitude for the life, no matter how short, no matter how long, no matter how it ended, but that you're grateful for that life. And that's much more powerful than closure and now I'm done.
Yes.
And you listen to anybody who has lived with a homicide or lived with a tragic death, and they think, okay, I get through the trial, I get through get all the answers, and then I'm going to be done. And they're not.
And they're not. No.
And then they're confused and distressed and depressed because why am I not done with this?
And it's the same, like people, it's like if they just go to jail for 14 years, if they just get the death penalty, I'll find closure, and they don't.
No, I actually got to experience this. Of course, I live in Oklahoma City, and I was part of the whole, bombing experience when that happened to my city. And I watched those families, and they kept thinking, all right, once we go through the trials, it's going to be fine. Once we do this, once we do that. And the day that Timothy McVeigh was found guilty and was sentenced to death, the families came out of that courthouse in Denver, and the first words out of their mouth were, "Don't talk to us about closure."
Wow.
So I think that is one of those other, baggage things that we put on people.
Yes.
Well, when are you going to find closure? Well, we're not.
Yes.
And so when people keep searching for that or trying to manufacture that, once again, we haven't resolved anything. We've just kind of covered it over.
Yes.
And it's going to come out. It's going to come out.
Yeah, yeah. I had a Zoom call today with a staff group who were doing a retreat, and one of the men on the retreat was they were out in a group, and there was an accident. He was hit and run over by a car and died in front of them. And so I sat with the staff group, and we went through all of those kind of ideas of grieving and loss and all of the what ifs that we put ourselves through, and then we've got another retreat this weekend, so we'll just put it behind us and move forward, and it was a really, really interesting conversation, walking them through all of those things. Although I could have used that idea that there's no closure, just closings. I could have used that idea a little earlier today.
I give it to you. You may use it.
I'll tell people that I thought that up on my own.
Please do. That will be fun.
So the age of COVID, unresolved grief in the age of COVID. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I think there's so many layers to that. I think we as a people, we as a global people, are grieving. We are grieving the loss of safety.
Yes.
It's scary to go outside.
Yes.
How do I feel about going to get my hair cut or go to the grocery store? So we're grieving the loss of freedom and safety in so many ways.
And the loss of the future that we had imagined.
Yes. I mean, I have a calendar here on my wall that's full of places that I'm supposed to be this year.
Yeah.
And I look at that and go, what does that mean to me that I can't be there? I mean, what does that define me as if I'm not busy with my suitcases going someplace? And so we've lost a whole lot of those pieces. And then you get into the actual deaths and the losses.
Yes.
And, we have so many tragic stories of people in isolation, people dying alone, and not just COVID deaths. I've done at least 6 funerals since all of this began for people who were in nursing homes or care facilities, but their families couldn't be there with them.
They weren't dying from COVID, but the family couldn't be at their side.
Correct. So it's not a COVID death, but I call all of those COVID-related deaths. Yeah. Right? I did a service for a young man, another one who died of suicide, and he was having extreme substance issues. He finally decided, okay, it's time for me to go to rehab, and he couldn't get in because rehab was closed because of COVID, and then he took that next ultimate step. So.
Wow.
So I think the isolation and the lack of being able to be close, and then the isolation of services. I mean, those first 3 months when we were really locked down, I'm doing services for 1 or 2 people or nobody and doing
Yes.
it all on Zoom, or I'm doing it for 10 people and there's 10, 15 cars in the parking lot listening to it on the FM station. It feels very disjointed. It feels very holding my breath
Mm-hmm.
because this is how it's supposed to be. And then we've got all of those people who walked in and said, we'll just wait.
Yes.
I worry more about them than I do anybody
Yes.
because they're not coming back.
Yeah. No, I see that. I see that around our locations where we're now reaching out to people who said, "I'll just wait," and they're like, "No, we're over it now. We're past it. We're good to go." Yeah.
Mhm. And they're not.
They're not. No.
But they do not want to get back into that rawness of what it felt like at the beginning.
Yes.
I talked to a funeral director the other day. He said, I have 80 cases, waiting for people to come back. And I said, you'll be lucky to get 10.
Yep. Totally.
Because they're not going to come back.
Totally.
And so now we have this national piece of all of these people who are trying to navigate what that loss means, whether it's COVID related or not, that didn't have that first step.
Totally.
Whether it is, a traditional service or a ritual or a ceremony or a celebrant service, whatever, they're not having anything.
Totally.
And so we've got a whole lot of families out there that didn't have what we consider to be that healthy first step.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't have access to the rituals.
They did not, and the people. They,
Yes.
you can't hug people, and you can't cry together, and you can't do all of those pieces. The best way that you start your grief journey is to express it.
Yes.
And say it out loud and talk about it and cry about it and
Yes.
have somebody there with their ears listening to it. That's how
Yes.
you get started.
Totally.
And so if you're having to do all of this in isolation and without those kinds of supports and tools, then they don't know where to go.
Yeah, I think part of that is the language that we use. We talk about moving on, as though you're here. And the best thing you can do is get over there. And, I talk to people a lot about, and related to this situation, that when emotions like this come up, the challenge is to move towards them, not away from them. But we've talked to people about moving on. And so my grief is here. I need to move on. I need to get over there. I need to get away from my grief. And now you're calling me and saying I should open this wound again. I should move back towards my grief. I should sit with it again. I should think about it again. No. I've moved as far away as I can at this point in time. And I want to keep moving away from it. Not understanding that it's still over here, and if we don't deal with it, it will deal with us.
Yes, it's back to the stages of grief. We have identified grief as a linear process.
Exactly.
And so if I don't approach that, then then I'm good.
Yes.
And I cannot even explain to you how worried I am about our society.
Yes.
With all of these walking wounded people out there who did not have what we know in the business. I've been in this business for 25 years. I've seen a lot of people.
Yes, you have.
Dealt with a lot of people. And I know what it means when you don't have that opportunity, whatever that means for you. If that means a mass, if that means a ritual, if that means a gathering, if that means a graveside, whatever. When you don't have that, there's a piece missing inside, and it's really hard to get it back. It's never too late, and we'll talk about that part. But I really believe that we, especially those of us in funeral service, those of us who work with grieving families, those of us who, work in counseling situations, we need to really have our antennas up.
Yes.
Because we've got 5 months of people who have not had what we would consider a healthy start.
Yes, so true. Wow. All right, let's do this. I've taken up your time. You're so gracious. Thank you for coming and being a part of tonight. This
let me talk. Just let me talk.
No kidding.
I'm good at that.
I'll just get off the screen and go get a coffee, and I'll come back when you're sort of finished. No. You have yeah. I think, Glenda, we need to do this on a regular basis. Get you to come back and let's talk about different elements of grief. But I always try to close our live by asking the guest about a practical action step or steps that people can take. So, with unresolved grief, what would those steps be?
I think the first thing is kind of what we were just talking about. Have a ceremony. It is never too late. Just as I explained with that sweet lady who I got to do a service for her baby who died 5 years ago, it's never too late.
Yes.
And if that means a gathering in your backyard, if that means planting a tree, if that means, putting a bench someplace, or just getting people together and showing pictures and telling stories, ceremony heals.
Yes.
If it didn't, we wouldn't do all of these ceremonies all over the place, right? I mean, just the ceremony of going out and shooting off fireworks, which I hate, but there's something ceremonial about that. So have a ceremony, whatever that means to you and to your journey. And I don't care if it was last month or 6 months ago or 6 years ago. It's never too late to honor and to respect and to start that process. That feels real scary, but it is much more freeing than anybody can even imagine.
Yes.
To have a ceremony. And I think one of the biggest things is talking is so healing.
Yes.
We talk a lot in our business about establishing the significance of the event. If something happens to you, if you go into the hospital, you want to tell people about it, right? I went to the hospital and I had to have this surgery and it was, 5 days and I almost died, and you want to talk about it. So that's what we call establishing the significance of the event, and the way that you find footing in order to take the next steps into remembering and embracing and being grateful is to talk about it.
Yes.
So you've got to find safe people.
Yes, and that's the key.
Yeah, that's the key.
Yeah.
You've got to find safe people and safe ears
Yes.
who are not going to say, "Are you friggin' kidding me? You're wallowing in your grief. That was 5 years ago. Get over it."
Yeah.
You've got to find people who will say, "Wow, that's really, really hard."
Yeah.
And it's going to take you some people.
Yes.
You're going to go through some peaks before you find those safe ears who will just let you talk and let you express what that is and what it felt like and what it meant.
Yeah.
I still steal this from my father, Doug Manning. He says that people in grief need the 3 H's. They need you to hang around, they need you to hug them, and they need you to hush.
That's true. Yeah.
And that means finding people who will allow you to talk. It may be silly talk, it may be off the wall talk, but the talk is the point.
Yes.
And that may mean friends, that may mean somebody in a grief group, that may mean a therapist, that may mean a pastor, whatever that means. It just means this part is the most healing piece.
Truly.
Getting it out and getting it expressed.
Truly.
Then embrace it back.
Yeah. I think of the sort of the metaphorical picture that I have of that is like meeting someone whose heart is big enough that they create this sacred grove that you can walk into.
Yes.
And you're protected, you're safe inside that circle. There's no question, there's no judgment, there's no fear. Their heart is big enough to allow you to walk in and say whatever it is you need to say, without fear of judgment.
Right. And those are hard people to find.
Those are, yeah.
So you kind of have to, try a few out.
Yeah.
Try a few years out.
Yeah, and the first time someone says to you, "Well, you should," they're probably not your safe person.
No, they're not your safe person. They're then you say thank you very much.
Exactly.
Because shoulds and woulds and coulds are not helpful. They're not healing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how hard that was.
Yes.
I can't imagine what you went through.
Exactly.
Those are the people you're looking for that will just let you be what you need to be, wherever that happens to be.
Totally.
Most healing thing you could do.
Totally.
And then of course, I think there's great benefit in reading. I say that personally because I run a publishing company that we
Yeah.
publish books on grief, so it's a little selfish. But there is such a wide variety of authors and experts and people telling their own stories out there. I mean, it's a rich library of people and opportunities for you to either find books generally on the grief experience, or to find somebody who's writing about your particular experience,
Yes.
about suicide or an infant loss or a sibling or a spouse. So, go check out as many websites, Google grief books and,
Yes.
start just checking them out. Some books are really, really healthy. Some aren't.
Yes.
And so you've got to find which ones are going to speak to you and give you that insight, if you will, into, yes, that really resonates with where I am.
Totally.
This person either is an expert or a learned person and is giving good advice, or this person lived through it. And if they can live through it and if they can walk through it, then I can glean some tools from them.
So that's a good opening.
Good opening.
Good opening. Talk to me about your dad's newest book. I think I have a graphic here. I'm going to bring it up. Talk to me about this book. Grief's Second Mile.
Yes. Insight Books, of course, is Doug Manning's book publishing company. He has over 45 books and resources in the area of grief. So this is my day-to-day life. This is what I live. But he wrote this book about 2 years ago because he was hearing from so many people in his travels and when he spoke, or people responding to his other books saying, okay, all of the books get me to the first year.
Yes.
This is what you're supposed to experience for the first year, and then you're supposed to be done. Ta-da! And so he really felt compelled to address that, by the end of the first year, you may not be anywhere near done.
Yes.
And so here's some concepts, here's some tools, here's some ways to think differently about what that journey can look like.
Yes.
And it's really resonated with so many people because, once again, it's that societal experience of you got 3 days of bereavement leave, and you certainly are going to be done by the end of the first year.
Yeah, totally.
Done. So we really love this book because it gives permission, which is what everybody in grief is looking for. It gives them permission to say, yes, I'm still walking, and I'm still growing, and I'm still learning, and I'm still embracing, and it's okay.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with that.
If grief is about loss, this is a loss that's come into your life that will never change. This loss is never going away. So why would the grief over this loss go away? There's an element of this grief that will be a part of your journey forever. I love what you said, that the growth is towards gratitude for life. And I love that idea that this is where we're growing towards. But this is a permanent loss. This is a part of your life that's never going to change. And people struggle with that. So I had 4 children and 1 died. People ask me, how many kids do I have? Do I have 4? Do I have 3?
Right. What do I have?
What do I have? Do I have 2 sons or 1 son? And am I ashamed of my grief? Am I ashamed of my story? Am I ashamed of the journey that I'm on? Or is it okay for me to be on this journey? All of these things are part of growing through grace. So I'm glad that your dad was a part of my training week. Yeah, he's a pretty special guy.
He is. I'm a very, very lucky person.
You are.
To grow up under his tutelage.
You are. So tell us, at Insight Books, I'm going to leave that website address up for those of you that want to write it down. 45 books from your dad. What else is there on the website? A blog?
Yes, there are articles that I've written, and there is a blog that I write on occasion. I'm better at it sometimes than others. Doug actually has a blog that he has on Facebook called the Heretic something. I'll have to look that up. But yes, there's a blog. There's articles. There's articles about celebrants, which you brought
Yeah.
up in talking about what we do as celebrants, but also a lot of information about the grief experience. And we also have a few other authors, because we pick up authors in areas that Doug's not comfortable writing
Yeah.
in. So we've got a lot of books, for children or for, specific losses. So it's, Doug started this company out of his garage in 1987.
Wow.
And it's just grown and been, hopefully a help and a tool and a blessing to a lot of people
No
over
kidding.
the years as we've
No
done
kidding. No
Mhm.
kidding.
it. Mhm.
Glenda, I am extraordinarily thankful that you came to spend some time with us
Appreciate it. Thank you for
tonight.
reaching.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll do this again.
Okay,
Yeah.
give me a call. We'll
Yes.
figure it out.
Yeah, we will. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
And for all of you that are watching, even after this live is over, you can still leave comments or questions. I'll be coming back to review the comments and interact with you as we go forward. And don't forget to click on notifications so that you get a reminder whenever it is that we go live. And if you've gotten some value out of tonight, please feel free to share it on all of your social media platforms. And again, please check out the resources that are available at insightbooks.com. Our guest next Monday night is Oceana Sawyer. You will fall in love with her. Oceana is a certified death doula, and we're going to be exploring grief in the African American psyche and experience, and it's going to be a fascinating discussion that you will not want to miss. So thank you for being with us here tonight. Thank you again to Glenda. Stay safe, everybody.